Today we're looking at Birmingham Pen Company's Pitt Blockhouse Sepia. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Birmingham Pen Company's Pitt Blockhouse Sepia is a magenta-y brownish ink, not sepia. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen per day. I then put it into a Lamy All-Star with a 1.1 stub to take my notes for this video. Before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down, immediately put it into water. And this is weird because it doesn't, to me, look a ton in the tones in what I'm getting, but it explains why instead of sepia it's a magenta-y brown. We see this very, very light magenta push up. We see that gray line on the bottom, and we see a very watered down highlighter blue across the top. It's just an odd thing. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And what we see is largely the same thing. Now, the ink does not travel as far after being let dry for 10 minutes, but all of the color compositions are basically the same except the distance that it travels. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it takes it very well. It does spread ever so slightly, which you almost expect. It doesn't blur, it doesn't feather all over. I would feel confident using this in a note-taking situation. Water reactivates and lifts the darkest parts of the ink, but leaves this magenta-y color behind. Pen flush does very much the same thing that water does. The standout thing for me is that flush isn't doing anything more than water. So when water doesn't really get it and make me feel like it's going to get everything, I look at the flush to see if anything more comes of it. If nothing more comes up from the flush, then I worry about if it would really start to maybe hang around the pen a little too much. Hopefully, flush would be all that it takes. If it's not, you could use the 1/3 bleach solution because it completely obliterated it from the page. That's only 30 seconds, which makes me feel like if you had to get that far, you should be able to get it in, get it out, wash that bleach solution out of your pen entirely. But I'm hoping there would be no real need for that. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Birmingham Pen Company's Pitt Blockhouse Sepia, my goodness, they go for long names, has a viscosity of 2.39, which makes it a very normal flowing ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairefontaine, Tomoy River, and Rhodia paper with the extra fine and medium nib. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Birmingham Pen Company's Pitt Blockhouse Sepia has an average dry time of 12 seconds, making it a faster drying ink. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing sample consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub. I use a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's talk about these sample vials. So here's the problem I'm running into. Someone's going to tell me that this little plastic inner cap, you just get rid of it. After the first time, just chuck it. Okay? The thing is, if I chuck it, because the ink might be able to touch this metal cap. If the ink, like you see on the inside there, starts getting there, then that oxidation is going to make its way into the ink itself. That's going to be a problem for me. So with a metal cap, that little plastic piece is needed, and this is messy. messy because it pops open and it sprays ink. Anyway, Clairefontaine. No bleed, no ghost. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Not sepia. It's magenta. That's a magenta ink. They call it a Blockhouse Sepia. That's magenta. The extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shading, 7 seconds to dry. The medium gives no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for the extra fine and the medium show us no color variation, and we didn't get any. The smear test says you could likely recover it. So, Tomoe River. Tomoe River, no bleeding, no ghosting, no bleeding and ghosting. That I was looking at this spot of bleed. This spot of bleed is on a scrubby, so I don't really count it. So we have no bleed, we have ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. It's a nice light tone of magenta, a little darker tone with the extra fine, or noticeably darker tone with the extra fine. No feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 12 seconds to dry. Noticeably darker tone again with the medium, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 26 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both shows us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation. The smear test says you likely can't recover it. Rhodia. That's not bleed, that's transfer from another page. We have no bleeding. We have no real ghosting. I mean, it's more on camera than it is in person. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does start showing us little bits of shading. Little bits. The K and H are a little darker than the rest of the word. The dot of the I is a little darker. The top of the second T in Pitt is a little darker. The H in Birmingham is a little darker. So it starts showing us some shading. The extra fine is a noticeably darker tone with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. It's lost here. 8 seconds to dry. The medium, noticeably darker tone with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 13 seconds to dry. I took my notes with a Lamy All-Star 1.1, and it had a noticeably darker tone than that medium, but no shading whatsoever. I was curious if maybe using the stub would help some. Using a different stub, it didn't. This is a pretty uniform tone when it's writing. Scrubby shows us, no color variation. We didn't really get color variation. The smear test says you could likely recover it. So I tested this on Levenger paper. The Levenger paper gave us no bleeding except on the scrubby where it's stupid thick. But we don't always get that on Levenger paper, so this looks a little more aggressive. And to remember with the chromatography, we did get those little bits that stayed behind, which to me often show a little bit of the aggression of an ink. We get no ghosting. The 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade in this writing. The extra fine is a noticeably darker tone with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 6 seconds to dry. The medium, a noticeably darker tone again with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation. The smear says you can likely recover it. I'm just very hung up on the fact that this is magenta, not sepia. The black and red paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 4 seconds to dry. The medium, a noticeably darker tone with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade in this magenta ink. Says sepia. Wrong. It's magenta. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation. And the smear test says you could likely recover it. And that's all that I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding inks that look like Birmingham Pen Company's Fort Pitt Blockhouse Sepia, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, because that Blockhouse Sepia is much more of a magenta color. I was really thinking a really vivid purple or violet would be what's needed here. And I chose Diamine's Majestic Purple because the sepia is such a muted tone that I felt the violet purple or the Majestic Purple would really pop next to it. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. Now, what do I think of Birmingham Pen Company's Fort Pitt Blockhouse Sepia? This magenta is really not the color for me. On top of that, I see much more of a magenta than I see of any kind of sepia with this ink. And for those reasons, I'm out. It's not for me. It doesn't mean that it's bad. Its performances have been perfectly fine. I just don't want to use it. Thanks for watching.